On Saturday, 25th July, Shri Dharmendra Pradhan, the Indian Education Minister, resigned amid a series of protests demanding accountability for examination irregularities. The protests were led by the Cockroach Janata Party, CJP, and were sparked by a leak in the National Eligibility Cum Entrance Test, NEET, affecting millions of students.
Right? You're referring to the nationwide protest led by the CJP, ignited after the NEET exam leak, a failure that shook millions of students across India and exposed a deep rupture in what was clearly a failing system.
Dharmendra Pradhan stepped down after his ministry's failure to properly oversee the National Eligibility Cum Entrance Test, a collapse in accountability that made his resignation unavoidable.
For public sector bank retirees fighting for pension updation in the MC Singla case, Dharmendra Pradhan's resignation carries a deeper symbolic weight. His exit underscores a rare moment of ministerial accountability, something retirees have never seen in their own 18-year struggle, which began in 2008 and is still winding its way through the Supreme Court.
Right. Usually, when we talk about accountability in politics, it's triggered by a sudden scandal, right? Like missing funds or a leaked tape.
Right, yes. Like a disastrous election, something loud and, well, undeniable.
Exactly. The machinery of government usually only stops when something big gets caught in the gears.
Definitely.
Today, we're looking at how the state's machinery doesn't collapse in crisis, but grinds people down slowly. From India's Gen Z students battered by systemic failures to public sector bank retirees still waiting for justice since 2008 in the MC Singla case. Welcome to today's deep dive. I'm Aditi Sharma, and my co host is Priyanka Chakraborty.
Thanks, Aditi. We are going to be acting as your guides to a pretty fascinating piece of hypothetical or what I've political commentary today.
We are, and just to be totally clear up front, we're purely exploring the source's purely theoretical scenario here. We aren't picking political sides, just unpacked how they contrast a real resignation with a completely hypothetical one at India's Department of Financial Services or DFS.
Right. Our mission is really just to examine the author's arguments around institutional indifference, moral accountability, and this incredibly long, decade long legal battle over pension updation for public sector banks.
So let's start with the real event that sparked this whole piece. Back in July 2026, India's Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan resigned.
Yes, that was following the what they call the cockroach movement.
Right. Students were protesting deteriorating hostel conditions, literally finding cockroaches in their food, which is just awful.
It's terrible.
But it wasn't just about the bugs, was it?
No, I mean, the insects were just this visceral symbol of a system.
A failing system?
Yes, it was basically about a system that had stopped listening. It was young people shouting that they didn't matter, and Pradhan stepping down. Well, it was framed as a rare admission of that systemic failure.
So, taking that real moment of accountability, the author imagines that wave reaching the Ministry of Finance.
Imagine that.
They picture Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman stepping up to the cameras and just resigning. Not because of political pressure, but because of a failure of conscience regarding 8 lakh retirees who have been waiting nearly 20 years for pension dignity and justice.
Yes, it's a powerful image, especially when we recall that over 250,000 bank retirees have died while waiting for justice.
It's kind of like, someone walking away from a super lucrative corporate job.
Yes, purely on ethics.
Exactly. Not because they're forced to, but because the company's ethics just don't align with their own anymore. They're refusing to be the face of that injustice.
And that's the exact parallel the author's drawing here. The hypothetical resignation centers around a very specific legal battle. It's the MC single pension updation case, that's SLPC 5561 from 2016. Basically, thousands of public sector bank retirees have been fighting for 18 years to get pension parity with retirees from the Reserve Bank of India, the RBI, and current day public sector bank employees.
Wait, hold on. 18 years?
Yes, nearly 2 full decades.
I mean, for a standard pension dispute? How does basic financial administration drag on for nearly 2 decades? We're talking about standard pensions here, not like untangling centuries of common law.
Well, the author's critique points straight at the Department of Financial Services, or the DFS. They describe the DFS as, well, masters of the art of delay,
The art of delay.
right? It describes this relentless strategy using frivolous adjournments and, contradictory affidavits just to run down the clock.
Wow, running down the biological clock on super seniors. People in their 70s and 80s in the winter of their life.
Yes, and that's the really grim mechanism at play here. The author implies this DFS strategy isn't just about bureaucratic inefficiency, it's actually a calculated financial tactic.
Because the liability shrinks.
Exactly. By running out the clock, the government's financial liability literally shrinks every time a petitioner passes away.
That's just immoral.
For these folks, time isn't just an administrative variable. I mean, it's their literal lifespan.
That is just wow. And the source actually gives us some devastating glimpses of what that delay looks like on the ground.
Yes, it's hard to read.
Like, there's a retired branch manager in Punjab who had to sell his home just to pay his medical bills.
And a widow in Kerala who receives a pension that is actually lower than the minimum wage.
Just heartbreaking. And then a former cashier in Bihar who actually died while waiting for this case to resolve. One of 250,000 retirees who has died waiting for justice, and the state to keep its promise to public sector bank retirees. His petition is now just officially marked abated.
How sad, just awful.
There's a quote from one of the retirees in the text that honestly it just stopped me in my tracks. They said, "We served the nation. Now the nation is waiting for us to die."
I mean, it's so easy for us to hear about a banking dispute and just tune out. But look at who this actually impacts. This is the generation that literally built India's modern banking infrastructure. I mean, they carried cash through floodwaters. They opened accounts in rural villages without electricity long before digital banking made things easier.
Oh, absolutely. These PSB retirees were the bedrock of today's thriving India's financial sector. And look how they've been paid back.
So, the underlying question for you listening is whether it's proper and right for a society to honor its promises to the people who laid its foundations or to renege on it.
And the core argument here is that Pradhan's real resignation proved that students matter. The author suggests that ending this judicial purgatory and the DFS accepting its moral obligation to retirees would prove that bank retirees' seniors matter too.
Exactly. Both acts, one real, one imagined, they're about acknowledging that governance requires empathy, not just administration.
Right? Which leaves us with a really tough thought for you to ponder before we go.
Yes, it's a big one.
The cockroach movement forced accountability because it was visible, right? It was this visceral, highly shareable youth protest.
Right? It went viral.
But if a vulnerable demographic like elderly retirees lacks the energy or the time or the social media savvy to create a viral protest, how can they ever force an indifferent system and government to take accountability?
Yeah. If the machinery of government only stops when something loud gets caught in the gears, what happens to the people like bank retirees without a voice and super seniors who can only whisper?
Right now, the government of India still has the time and the responsibility to honor the promise it made to bank retirees when they entered the state backed pension scheme more than 3 decades ago. And after Dharmendra Pradhan's resignation last month, the last thing the government wants is another public embarrassment and resignation.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and leave a comment for the algorithm. It ensures our podcast reaches people like you who needs to see this important message. Namaste.